Our first talk will be given by Cassidy Blaede, and he works with the Ubuntu desktop upstream on design and the app ecosystem. I'm sure he's going to tell us a bit more about himself. So yeah, enjoy.
So, hi everyone, welcome to How to Make a Delightful App Listing. I'm Cassidy, as I was just introduced, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on about me, but I do work at the Endless OS Foundation, and I do contribute to GNOME design. So, first of all, what is an App Store listing, in case you don't know? It is basically this. It's, in an App Store, a page with information about an app where people go and download the app or install the app. How many of you have seen an app listing kind of like this? And I'll just read it out to emphasize it. Paint App by Paint App developers. Paint App is a simple GTK3 raster image program for GNU/Linux written in Python 3 using GNOME technologies and making use of G actions. It supports Xorg and Wayland. You've we have some of those in our app stores, right? We've got those. How many of you have written an app listing like that? Have you? Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you for being honest. Yeah, so our goal is to not do this. Here is technically the same app that had a little bit more thought put into its actual, this is the actual app stream data here. It's drawing an interesting name with a really nice little icon by Romain FT, an actual name, not just so-and-so developers. Edit screenshots or memes. It has a heading there. It has a description talking about what you can do with the app. Resize, crop, or rotate an image. Apply some filters, insert or censor text, and much more. It has high-resolution screenshots with really good art that shows off what you can actually do with the app, not just a generic, boring, blank state. So this is our goal. We want more apps like this. All right, that's my talk. No, I'm just kidding. So let's talk about how we can get here, right? So spoiler alert, here's the agenda for this talk. First, who is this talk for? Blank is not a bad word. Free desktop app stream MetaInfo, what a mouthful. And providing quality MetaInfo. So first, who is this talk for? Raise your hand if you're an app developer. If you develop an app. Ah, cool, good. You came to the right place. Raise your hand if you work on the ecosystem. So that's like Linux, distro, or Flatpak, or Snap, or an app store. Okay, good, you're also in the right place. Great. Raise your hand if you want to help make open source apps be more successful. Great, all right, yeah, you're all in the right place. Great, so that's who the talk's for. So first, app developers, this is really suited for you because you're the best people, you're the best people to market your apps. You know the apps, you know the reason you made the app do a certain thing. So it's really important that you are the ones who are making your app listings. Secondary audience, the ecosystem people, this talk might reveal some capabilities that the actual technology has under the hood to make your products better, your app stores and your ecosystems better. And then for potential contributors, if you're looking for a way to improve an app listing that you come across, this is a great way. It's a low technical contribution that you can do, which is a really great way to get involved with a project. And as a reminder also, I said apps. Games are apps too, in a way. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about being an app developer. A game developer also makes sense. So second, I hope I'm allowed to say this word in front of the open source community without repercussions. Marketing is not a bad word. Thank you. Thank you for the dramatic effect. In fact, I'd go further and say that marketing is a requirement for open source to be successful. App Store pages are marketing pages. There's no way around it. It's the same as a landing page on the web or a flyer that you would hand somebody for a physical good. It's a marketing device. It's how you introduce your app to a new person. You can be very dry and very factual, and nobody is going to want your app. You have to be more interesting, be more compelling, tell people why they want it. You have to market your product. There's this weird stigma in open source. I feel like people don't like marketing. Maybe we lean too much on being dry and factual. We got to cut that out. We got to market. And if you look at the mainstream app stores, proprietary app stores, popular apps there have paid marketers whose jobs it is to market their apps. Designing icons, writing copy, composing screenshots to ensure their app is the one that you download. And while we don't have to or necessarily even want to do everything like the big app stores, like there's a reason we're different, right? And we're here. But that is the level of competition you're going up against. So we have to kind of match the quality there. As a specific example, this is from Apple's App Store marketing website. And as a reminder, the Apple App Store is available for iOS, iPad OS, Mac OS, tvOS, watchOS, everything OS basically. And so they say specifically, we can help you with marketing both on and off the App Store. The App Store has a global marketing team whose sole purpose is to help developers drive downloads for their apps. So you can go look at their website there. They have a whole mini website talking about why App Store is so great and why it's a marketing tool. So on the Open Desktop, we've got to do a good job too, because again, this is what we're up against. And it's important to always be thinking when you're writing an app listing, always be thinking from that marketing perspective. An app's README on GitHub is a great place to put technical information. Nobody cares in your app listing. So we always be thinking about how would you actually be marketing this app, not just let's provide some details, but actually market it. So yeah, marketing is not a bad word. Third, free desktop, AppStream, MetaInfo. I had to reread my slide, make sure I got all the right compound words there. If you've never heard of this before, it sounds like I made it up. We really like our complicated technical compound words. Let's look at each word to kind of break it down. So free desktop. Raise your hand if you know what free desktop is. Okay, actually the majority. That's really good. Okay, cool. For everyone who didn't raise their hand and anybody at home who didn't raise their hand, this is how freedesktop.org describes himself. I'm not going to read that. This is how I describe freedesktop.org. It's still a lot of words, but hopefully it's a little simpler. It's software and specs to make open source desktops and ecosystems interoperable. And interoperable is that key word. So this is why, free desktop is why clicking the icon of a KDE app opens when you're on a GNOME desktop, or KDE Neon, or Endless OS, or Fedora, or whatever. The reason things work across the desktop ecosystem is because free desktop. It's the simplest way I can put it. So it's also the umbrella for projects like portals, which are used on every modern Linux-based OS to provide sandboxed apps functionalities and keep users in control. And effectively, it's the plumbing of the modern desktop. It's really important stuff. I'm a big fan. So that's what free desktop is. AppStream. This is how AppStream describes itself. I'm not going to read that either. You can pause the stream, or if you have really good eyesight and are a really fast reader, you can read that. But I like to say it's software and specs to present and describe apps. And specifically, this might make more sense when we look at MetaInfo, which, don't worry, I'm not going to give you another page. I like to think of as a specification for describing apps specifically. So free desktop, AppStream, MetaInfo. It's still a mouthful, but now you know what it is. So here's an example. Here's what actual MetaInfo looks like. Also tiny text. Don't actually read it. It's just XML. But if you look on the left there, this is the type of information that MetaInfo can provide. So there's the name, developer name, a short summary, a long description, release notes, screenshots, content rating, relevant URLs, branding, binary name, app ID, license. There's a lot of everything you need as an app store to show an app and show it off in a really cool way is provided by the MetaInfo. Basically everything you need to make an app listing like this. So, and here's zoom in a little bit here. So, there's rich branding, high resolution screenshots, lots of user focused information. You can even expand, there's even more information there, links out to relevant places, information about how the app is actually built and its licensing and how safe or unsafe it is according to on a technical level. There's age rating there. All that information is powered by AppStream. So now you know what free desktop, AppStream, MetaInfo is. So let's put it to use. So again, this is that same list, an abbreviated version of that list of everything that AppStream MetaInfo can provide. So I have an app. It's a fun little app about analyzing the screen resolution of screens and if they're good for high DPI or not, because I'm a nerd about high DPI. So here is an example of some of my meta info that I've actually written for my app. So name, the app is called Dippy because it's a pun on DPI. It's developed by me. It's short description, which is like a little header, or when there's constrained space and you want to provide a very short way to describe your app. It says calculate display info like DPI and aspect ratio. It's straight and to the point. But then there's a long description, and here's my long description, which I'm not going to read it through word for word, but this is where a user has already been interested in your app and they clicked on it and now they want to learn more about it. So give them good information here. It's a really simple app. This is longer than the app's code probably. Like, it's really simple. But when people are searching for the app, they're going to search for some of these terms. So this is really good to include good search terms in here. And they're also like, they want to know, is this worth, actually taking my time to install this app? So provide good information, talk about the features that your app actually supports, talk about who the app is actually intended for, what it can do. You can even put like future plans in this information because you can update this information over time. It's not static. So you can say, yeah, and in the future we plan to do this, if that's something you actually want people to know. So again, then there's also things like release notes, version 4.0.2, fix an issue with the about dialog. Also, don't just write bug fixes and performance improvements because nobody likes that. And this is, in a world of auto updates, I think that's why a lot of people just don't pay any attention to release info. But especially, for me, I work at the Endless OS Foundation where we work with people who are offline or have very limited connectivity. And this might be what convinces them your app is worth updating. So they might not have automatic updates on. They might have expensive internet. So tell them what they're getting in the update. Otherwise, they just might not ever update your app. So if you actually want to get new fixes, tell them what the fixes are. And then you also want to provide screenshots. Like I said with that example earlier, show the app in use. Actually show off the app. Don't just show a blank, ugly blank slate. Show compelling artwork that was created with your app or a real use case of your app in use. And then there's content rating, which there could be a whole, I'm sure there have been talks about this. The Open Age Rating Service, ORS, is a really cool initiative where developers can self-describe the type of content in their apps, and then it is encoded as, there's a specification, it's encoded as different categories with different ratings, and then app stores can take that information and do things like say, this app is appropriate for kids ages 10 and up, or this app is only appropriate for teens, or this app is appropriate for adults. Or it can do things like this app might have violence. So if somebody has PTSD and is triggered by violence, they can filter the app store to avoid those types of apps. So it's really important to provide that content rating as well. And then you can also provide relevant URLs. So I have links to the homepage, the issue tracker, support, donate, and app stores again can take those things. They can just put them in a list of URLs if they want, or they can actually put a donate button up at the top next to an install button, or integrate that more into the flow, which is really interesting. And then branding. So the two elements of branding that are really important for your app are icons and colors. So with icon design, if you're developing an app for a specific platform, please use that platform's icon guidelines for your app. It makes it better for everybody. GNOME has really great icon guidelines. KDE has really great icon guidelines. Elementary has really great icon guidelines. If you're targeting one of those apps one of those platforms specifically, even though your app can be installed on more platforms, fit in with those guidelines. If you're not targeting a specific platform, or your platform doesn't have good guidelines or any guidelines, I honestly just say use GNOME's because they were designed specifically to work well and mesh well with popular third-party app icons, things like the Firefox and Chromes of the world that have their own branding. So GNOME has really great icon guidelines. You can visit that link at developer.gnome.org for those guidelines. And brand color. So this is an interesting new area. This is not code that's shipping in GNOME Software yet, but is still starting to be used in places that are interesting. If your app has a color palette it's branding, use your app's color palette in your brand color in the meta info. A tip is complement the icon. Don't necessarily make it match the icon exactly. Think about if that color was behind your icon. An example, again, this Firefox example here. You know, you're not using Firefox orange would be really great, except you'd lose the icon in that. So think about if that color is used with or next to your icon, how it can complement it. And when in doubt, talk to a designer. Hopefully every app in the world has a dedicated designer. I know that's not reality. So ask your design friends. There's lots of us in open source. You know, ask somebody who, you know, if somebody's helping you make an icon, ask, hey, what color would you pair this with? And then set that as your brand color in the MetaInfo. Again, you can do really cool stuff like this. You can also do, this is apps.gnome.org, which is using, right now it's actually, I think, doing algorithmically deriving the color, so it sometimes gets it wrong. I'm not sure. But the idea is that websites like this that show off an app can even use that app color. So you'll see like the little badges down there by the Get Involved section, the you know, badge by the app developer's name. Obviously the big header behind it, that's not like an image that the developer submitted, that's generated from the MetaInfo. So you can do really interesting and compelling things when you like take the extra little step and to say, here's some brand color. And finally, license. So I am looking at the time and realizing I have like powered through this talk, so sorry I'm talking so fast. I'll try to slow myself down. But license. So it's important to include a license with your app MetaInfo because this is the, you know, the license of the code itself. Of course, I always would say if you have a choice to make your code open source, make it open source. But regardless, it's important to provide accurate information here. And an example of where this is used, it's not just like, hey, this app is licensed under the GNU public license version 3.0 or later. Like, nobody cares to read that necessarily, but app stores can actually do interesting things with this information. So this is an example from GNOME Software. It uses the license to help determine how safe an app is. Recognized open source licenses are used to inform the user that the code is actually auditable. Auditable open source code is really important to safety and privacy. So that's actually considered when we show off the app. So you can learn about AppStream specifically at the freedesktop.org address there or with the QR code. There's also a web-based MetaInfo creator. It's pretty cool. It kind of steps you through writing good MetaInfo. And it's there at that URL as well. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Cassidy. Do we have any questions? All right. Please keep your questions simple and concise. Yeah.
Hi. How can someone who makes app stores make app developers' life easier to either make their listing better or just to promote their app in the store?
Yeah, it's a great question. The number one way I would say that you can encourage developers to give good app MetaInfo is make really good use of app MetaInfo. So do interesting things like when you're designing your app store, use that icon or use that brand color in interesting places. You know, the default is kind of thinking through that, like, okay, it goes on the header, but like you can do more interesting things like use it as an accent color on buttons, or when you have like a search result, like you could tint things using that color. Like that's one example of, you know, just use the data that's there, so apps that do use it show up better and look better, and then other developers go, oh, I want my app to do that. How do I do that? So that helps encourage developers to actually embrace it.
Hi. So I know on some systems where you have multiple package formats, like say, for example, Flatpak and apt and or PM or also Snap, sometimes there might be multiple app listings for a single actual app. Like say, for example, if you type in Blender on a computer that has, you know, Flatpak and Snap and apt, it might show up 3 different listings.
Yeah.
So are you aware if there is some sort of standard for essentially sort of unifying the app listing if you're, say, a distro developer or you create an app store?
Absolutely, yeah. There is the app ID. It's a reverse domain reverse domain name notation app ID, and that's supported by AppStream. That's the ID field. So that's like, in my case, it's like com.cassidyjames.dippy is the unique ID that I've associated with my app. So I would encourage, and I think mostly like distro packages and Flatpak like enforce this pretty well as a policy. I think Snap does not. They have their own ID. I would encourage Snap to like have maybe an RDNN field that then app stores could like match to duplicate in that case.
Of, say, standard for doing that on their behalf if, say, for example, we're a distro developer, or if we developed an app store front end, is that something we'd essentially have to do manually, or is there a way of sort of merging and matching different app IDs for the same app, sort of manually?
Yeah. No, yeah, I understand. Yeah, as far as I know, there's not an existing, I would say like the spec is use a unique ID, that's an RDNN notation. RDNN notation, yeah. There is also the ability to have custom metadata as part of your MetaInfo, so I could see like that it's a way to extend the specification. So you could say like x-snap ID or something like that maybe, which could help app stores deduplicate, but I think the better route is probably standardizing on using the RDNN. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I already have the MetaInfo for my app, but one thing I've noticed that is missing is the release notes. So how much release notes do you have to put? Would you encourage me to put in this MetaInfo? And do I have to keep track of all the releases, like a changelog? Because there's also already a changelog that's part of the Debian package.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I want that level of detail in the MetaInfo.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is releases, how much information you put in releases, how many releases back do you go? That, I don't know that there's actually a specification for how many releases. I think the best practice is like the last few major releases and then the last few minor releases in the current major release version. That's at least something I've heard somebody else say. But yeah, it's in my apps, I just have literally every single release that's ever been made in that, which is maybe not maintainable in the long run, but we'll address that when we get to it, I guess. And then yeah, as far as the Debian changelog, so I think an important way to think about it is the Debian changelog is a great changelog for developers, and the AppStream MetaInfo is user-focused. So in some cases, your users are developers if you're making developer tools, but in the majority of cases, a user might not care that you fixed an overflow bug in the blah, 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 blah library, whatever, or that you updated a dependency for such and such. They care about what, we fixed a crash when you do this, or there's a new feature that lets you do this. So it's kind of a different audience for the release info. Does that make sense? Cool.
Generally write the changelog to be more user-focused. Because it's like more a general public application. But yeah, I get that, yes.
Okay.
Let's give him a round of applause. Oh, okay.
Question about how to handle beta releases.
How to handle?
Beta releases. So
beta
if
releases,
you want to show, give the possibility to show or highlight or hide not stable releases for your app.
I'm not sure if that's specified in the MetaInfo spec for like version numbers. I think also, yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head. That's a good question though. Georges.
All right, one last question. We have a minute more left, so yeah.
This is probably myself shooting myself in the foot, but what do you think app metadata should have that it currently does not have in the ecosystem?
That's a good question. Well, my big one that I'm most passionate about that is now part of the spec is the brand color. Trying to think of other, One that I know is used as an extension of the spec right now is suggested price. I think that's really interesting because that means app stores could, if the app supports donations, which is a whole different mechanic, but I think in putting that information and coding it in the app stream information is really interesting because it means anywhere that we show that app, we can show a price or a suggested price next to it. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's other ones that I've seen. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I think that's probably the
We can
main
talk
one.
offline about this, but
Yeah,
if there's anything I'm interested in learning.
cool. Thanks.